and welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. This is a show hosted by patrons, featuring patron content, recorded live in the Invictus Discord as Malevolent is in its 5th season. The show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a recent update, so if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 234 or part 47, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are archived in the Discord before they're released to the public, so you can always listen later. I'm Queen. My pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control Arthur's left bicep.
And I am Fish. My pronouns are he, him, and I think I'm going to control Arthur's medulla oblongata.
Wow.
That is, of course, the connection between the brainstem and the spinal cord.
How dare you blow me out of the fucking water on my own show?
Everyone knows this.
Oh, yeah, common knowledge.
Common knowledge.
Oh, beautiful. I love it. Great. Well, thank you for coming on, Fish, because it is all my fault that Peppers isn't here to co-host.
Of course, somehow it is in fact all your fault and not at all Pepper's fault. As
Yeah.
we've heard from her.
Yeah, she was very adamant about posting in the Discord that it was completely my fault and not anything to do with her having plans this weekend.
Yeah, she made a statement.
Yes. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I also extra appreciate you writing our chapter summary, which you can go ahead and read for me.
Oh, yes, I will. Okay, I wrote this and Queen had to trim it for me because I'm Yapper. Okay. At the start of the chapter, Arthur states that confronting the entity behind Alexander held no benefit for them, making the decision to continue as if nothing was different. John apologizes to Yorick for not trusting that he had their best interests in mind when creating the hand, but Yorick reminds him that while he serves them now, that may not always be the case. Arthur comes up with a phrase that they can use when they need to talk in private again, that phrase being "in the fell clutch of circumstance." John says that he feels like they are heading into a confrontation that is bigger than anything they have faced before, and Arthur replies that they'll face it together. When the candle's veil drops, Arthur and John go back to arguing to make it seem that they didn't listen to Yorick. Arthur asks about Prince Warren, and Yorick reveals more about the history of this timeline. France has successfully conquered England. Arthur wants to know everything about Warren in order to impersonate him, but Yorick needs more specific questions. And that is the end of the chapter for this week.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot in this chapter
There was so much. I had to write so much.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, like Fish said, I had to chop up his chapter summary. I try to keep the chapter summary short, not only because I got some feedback that suggested I should, but also because everybody who is listening to this has already heard this chapter and probably poured over the transcript. So, I try not to make it take up too much of the episode, but God, this was hard. It was a meaty chapter.
It was very meaty, even though it wasn't especially long, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we've been getting slightly longish ones recently, but
Well, they usually get longer as the season goes on.
yeah, the France has successfully conquered England was not the reveal that I had queued up in mind, but I mean, sure, why not?
Sure, why not?
Why not?
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, okay. Let's start from the top.
hmm
What was like your favorite part of the whole chapter if you had to pick one part?
Oh man. Okay. So last chapter was such a huge, I'm still kind of like reeling from it with all of the reveal of Alexander and stuff. So I think that probably this chapter, it's still that, and like the fact that they are sort of having to work around this and sort of acknowledging it for the first time and then just basically being like, well, I guess we're just gonna wait and see what's up with that, and we're gonna, be aware of the fact that, she's following us, and we're basically just gonna see how that goes.
Yeah.
And also Arthur and John's immediate acting about them being pissed off at Yorick the instant that the candle went out was really funny.
Yes, I loved that. I loved the instant reveal of the lie, the deception. I feel like we got some really good cooperation from all of them this chapter.
Yeah, there was good teamwork.
Yeah, I feel like that we finally got to get on the level with Yorick for a minute and kind of actually interface with him on a, I guess, even playing field sort of. I feel like his act here of having created this magical barrier to help us really
Hmm.
made him a little bit more accessible for Arthur and John to talk
Hmm.
to.
And I love Yorick's when John tried to apologize. I love Yorick's intercepting that and being like, oh, it's fine. I serve you now, but that might not be the case eventually.
Yeah.
Which I have always believed that there is a higher thing behind Yorick, and I have spoken about it before, what I think is going on, but that's not directly relevant right now.
It takes great restraint for you to not tangent off into that. I love
It
that.
does. It does.
Thank you so much.
I'm trying so hard.
You're doing so good, Fish.
Thank you so much, Queen.
Oh
I'm,
my God, never do that again. Oh, that sent chills down my spine. Yeah,
I
I think
definitely will. I promise.
I think that I especially appreciated the very swift and honest turnaround
Yeah.
from Yorick in saying that like, hey, this is how it is right now, but I have my own plans going on and I have things that, I'm not always going to be the most upfront about. I do think it also helped to kind of ease my personal wariness of Yorick because for some
Oh, did
reason when
it?
the villain it did because for some reason when the bad guy or a suspicious gray neutral character admits that they're gray neutral, I'm like, okay, like we can all be on the same page and I don't need to worry about the fact that you think I'm falling for it. I
Uh-huh.
don't. I appreciate more when everyone's just on the level about what they're doing and we can
Hmm.
all stop pretending that I don't know.
Even though hilariously Yorick has not very much been the most upfront with sort of the big picture things, he's been pretty honest about the smaller things, I feel like, but there is still this big picture unknown that he has deflected from intentionally answering about the Dies Irae whole deal.
Yeah.
I'd like to read Rebecca. Rebecca said, Yorick is like our lovable court eunuch, and that is completely true. Completely
I
true.
do I'm more and more appreciative of the fact that Yorick is a genuine piece on the board and not just comedic relief or
Hmm.
existing for the sake of tension between John and, anything. Not that it takes much to get John to fight people.
I've always been sort of a Yorick apologist ever since episode 43, where people were talking about, oh, the fact that Yorick started answering the witch, and people were calling him like a traitor for answering her when she asked him. But I never saw it that way. I just saw it as like, I mean, yeah, he started answering as a response when she asked him stuff, but when John told him to shut the fuck up, he did that.
Yeah, yeah.
He's got one mode of operation, but he is still listening to John and Arthur right now, who are his current masters, his former apparently having been Kellen's sister, which is a whole other thing. Yeah, there's been a lot of Yorick meat, a
Yes.
lot of meaty Yorick lore.
And I also think that when it comes to Yorick and the way that we've seen him interact, I'm really getting hung up on that line when he was talking to John back when Arthur was dead.
Oh, yes. About them having prior history.
Yeah, I've known you for a long time or something like that. And
Yeah.
I remember latching onto that so hard and being like, what the fuck is going on? What like do you are is Yorick working for I doubt this. This is not my theory. Don't
Uh-huh.
don't assume that this is what I
It's
think.
okay. I won't judge you. I promise.
Is Yorick taking orders from somebody connected to the King in Yellow? Is it something
Hmm.
that is a broader part of John's lore as a fragment of the King in
Did
Yellow.
they hang out in the dark world?
Were they bros?
Did John crash on Yorick's couch?
Were they 5 feet apart in a hot tub because they're not gay?
We can't know that.
We'll
We don't
never
know it.
know. I have to wonder, like, it does that, how much is that playing into Yorick's function around John and the way that he interacts with John?
Especially because he seems a little bit more Arthur-sided, or at least maybe he just does because that was how the Vanguard initially only ever really spoke to Arthur and not John at first, which I assume was just because of the fact that, it didn't really have a proper vessel, so it was a bit harder to communicate, and that was why it only gave very small one-word answers until it was able to get a fresh new rotted head. The other one was too yucky, and then he was a tooth for a while. So,
Rebecca says it's like how your home Alexa is tuned to the home occupant's voice, but still answers to the guests in the house.
yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about this whole Kellen
Oh,
connection.
yes. Graham points out something that I remember them saying the other day, especially because Kellen in season one implied it was implied that the voices that Kellen heard, or at least like the madness that Kellen succumbed to, was related to the King in Yellow, and Kellen was instructed by that to kill his sister. So, what is the relationship there, if there's something there? That I just think that's a really interesting connection that we really don't have any answer for yet, or maybe we never will get, but it's really interesting. There really is something there, and
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I definitely think that there is something behind this history that will ultimately affect the end plot. I just feel like that was a seed that was planted and will
Mhm.
definitely come back around.
Let's call it a situationship for now.
It's complicated,
It's
TM.
complicated TM, yeah.
so so now this gets into I'm looking at the transcript right now. I always try to have the transcript up in another tab and glance at it and make sure like
Oh, yeah.
there's nothing I'm missing.
I always keep them on my phone.
What do you, first of all, I have a lot of feelings about the fact that Noel's theme played during John saying thank you to Yorick.
That was yeah.
I miss Noel so much. And hearing that,
It's like I can still hear his theme song.
oh my god, it drove me nuts. I was like, tell me he's gonna come around the corner from a boulder. Like,
Isn't it called
just,
Bittersweet City? I don't remember the
yes, it's
track
called
name.
Bittersweet.
It's great, which you can listen to on Harlan Guthrie's Bandcamp.
Yeah, I love the song. It's I only say Noel's theme because it's that is the way it's typed in the transcript. I
Mhm.
don't know if the person who writes the transcripts changes that kind of stuff or not, but I regardless, I have a lot of feelings about that. I also like
Yeah.
that John had the
Aw.
balls to say sorry because he didn't need to and there
Yeah.
was no reason to and he still did and I'm very proud of him.
Yeah. And his apology was very heartfelt, which was a really big difference from, he's been so distrustful of Yorick and has even been outwardly aggressive and angry and snappish towards him, even though Yorick necessarily didn't really need an apology because Yorick doesn't seem to give a fuck. But John still made sure that it was a good apology, which is very important to me, and I think really shows like his growth. And he's a real boy.
He's a real boy now.
He's a real boy now.
I loved the whole good because I'll be right back to telling you to shut up when the veil drops, purely for
Yeah, that
appearances.
was great. And then they both start immediately. God, that was so good.
Yeah,
They
I
both immediately get back into it, which oh man, that was the best. I know John was having fun.
yeah. And then they got into the whole like daunting conversation about
Oh yeah.
so we're heading into something, some confrontation between who or what yet, I don't know, but I don't think it's just our lives on the line anymore or those we love. I feel like everything may be lost. Whatever's coming, it's big.
Which does track for, I mean, what my expectations are. I've never really been one to sort of be like, here's what I think like the end arc of Malevolent will be, because I don't really fucking know. I mean, I'm sure the Dark World is there somewhere, but It definitely does feel very, very big, and I do find it very, very nice that Arthur's ultimate response was, "Yeah, we're gonna face it together still. We're not gonna give into it like how I gave into Horig," which was
Yeah.
another neat reflection moment from him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the whole "I let Horig shake me, that's not gonna happen again"
Mhm.
type thing. I I mean, I can't help but feel like that is Arthur sounds very sure of himself and very confident, and I do think that it was a good moment for him to have some self-reflection
Mhm.
and understand what other people might be going through when they do cave, but I just feel like there's no way in hell he's gonna live up to that. It's gonna happen again. It's gotta happen again.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I know all of the players that are going to be playing in this game, at least with whatever happens at the castle, but I have no idea what they'll do and what the outcome is. But speaking of horror, we got another ominous coughing fit from Arthur. Probably the worst one of the episode so far, as just another reminder that yeah, he's this man is diseased in some way from Horig. I think my money right now is on tuberculosis, personally.
Yeah, I mean, Arthur being the harbinger of tuberculosis, that's on a lot of people's bingo cards, I think. I'm betting that this is something I
Yeah.
think
Or just the plague.
the capital T, capital P.
Yeah, I would assume there would be more boils happening from my understanding of the plague.
I could do without
And maybe we just haven't had them described to us yet,
no.
personally.
I could do without Arthur developing boils. I I will say that I feel that this plague or whatever he's got going on with the coughing, I have a hunch that it's going to come down to Arthur unknowingly hurting other people and having to make a very difficult decision about how to deal with that.
See, that's interesting because I'm not sure if Arthur's gonna be contagious due to the events of the previous episode. The fact that he did not drink from Horrid's stream, which at least in terms of the Call of Cthulhu the Dark Ages lore, that would have made him an asymptomatic carrier of the disease that everybody he comes into contact with would be able to get infected, versus failing a save and falling asleep in the fairy circle. Only it's only stated that he becomes a carrier for the disease. So however that may affect other people, I'm not sure, because I think that that could either be a boon if he can just infect people instantly, or it could potentially fuck them over really badly.
And well, I was thinking of it in terms of the idea of the story in which Arthur has done something to hurt people he loves repeatedly. Sometimes it is his
Uh-huh.
fault and sometimes it's not, but especially when it's not something he does intentionally, like it's not
Uh-huh.
pushing somebody away or something like that. He's
That's always really hard.
yeah, it's a really difficult thing for him to get over, and I just feel like narratively it would be interesting to see how he does when it's something like this, where it is truly just there was nothing he could have really done, and then, is he going to beat
Yeah.
himself up for caving and all of
Will
that?
we will we be able to see him express more sympathy and understanding to people who from all accounts are probably cultists of some kind, you know?
Yeah,
The people at this castle who all the way back in time the witch said she would hear them chant the names of great old ones,
yeah.
but we're not sure in what capacity, they could have been warding against them. They could have been worshiping
It
them. We
could
don't really know
it
yet.
could also be as simple as a full-on ominous warning for, who ends up having a tangible body in the physical realm anymore and Arthur dying at the end of the story. I mean, I don't know that I buy that that's going to happen, but I do think that whenever I see a
Mhm.
character cough in a movie,
Oh,
they typically die like 20 minutes later.
I
So,
mean, yeah, he's
like
got that anime mom sickness. He's
I
got
don't
he's got a
think that
side ponytail right now. I can tell in his voice.
I think that Harlan is really good at subverting his tropes though, and
Oh
I
yeah.
think he's done really well to show us that what we expect is not generally what happens, which totally leaves you on your toes because sometimes it is. And I think that's the beauty of it. So, I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Yeah.
But as far as summing up this chapter, are there any other things that you feel like people who listen to the chapter without a lot of context may want to
Oh
know?
God. See, I can't put myself in that headspace because I need to know everything immediately. I truly don't understand. I respect people who are okay with living in not having context, I guess, but I gotta know. I don't think so.
Do you think there is any like Call of Cthulhu lore that people that you haven't mentioned so far in this episode?
In this episode, no, I
Okay.
beyond the mentions of Lilith, who has not been named Lilith yet in the show canonically, but who is definitely almost certainly possibly Lilith, and Horig, no, nothing that I can really make out.
Okay. So, question for you. If
Hmm.
one were thinking about what the hell the Vanguard is and where that name comes
Oh,
from and who the fuck that is, like what would you say?
I would say that I personally believe I keep screenshots of the Malleus Monstrorum on my phone,
I love you, you little nerd.
and I reread them over and over again. They also
Do
have
you
really
wear
cool art.
glasses?
Yes, I do.
Do you have a locker?
No,
Okay, good.
I have a
I'm just looking out
uh,
for you.
I have a big Tupperware container of seashells under my bed, though.
I love you.
I'll
You're
post a
so
picture of
great
them later.
fish.
Anyways, I would say that I currently believe that Yorick, the Vanguard, is this a splinter of another outer god called Tolsha. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I think I'll go with Tolsha. That sounds right. And Tolsha is this green flame that exists within the court of Azathoth and is unable to fully leave it. But whenever it gets summoned into the world by, cultists, pieces of it splinter off and go into the people who it then reanimates the corpses of, and then those individual splinters go out and do culty stuff, basically. And it's very heavily associated with death and undeath, and speculation that it feeds off of the energies of the dead or the undying. So there's a lot of necromancy associated with Tulsha, and the main thing about it is the green flame that perpetually surrounds Yorick is very, very ominous, as well as Yorick's, whole corpse thing going on. But however, Tulsha is how if that is true, I'm not sure how much Harlan maybe has changed the lore. It does lead into my theory about the Dark World being connected to the Court of Azathoth somehow, but that's still something that I don't really have a ton of evidence for beyond these little pieces. But yeah, not to
Interesting.
get too into it.
No, interesting. That's really cool. Because when I first heard the word Vanguard way back, I
Hmm.
thought of a literal guard, like a king's guard.
Yeah, that's usually the term, I believe.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, so these are total like Yorick is totally, somebody who used to in some way protect or was close to John as some kind of advisor or
That would
protection
be
or some
interesting.
kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that that may not be the direction it's intended to be in, but it would still make sense and I would enjoy it. I think it's fun.
Yeah. Maybe they met in the Dark World and Tulsha when John lost himself either the first or second time.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
there was some sort of if the Dark World is being used as an analog for the Court of Azathoth, or if the lore has just changed. That would be something that I think would be very interesting. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how long John was in the Dark World before he jumped out of the book. So,
Very, very long.
I mean, there could have been a long history between Yorick and John that he just does not remember.
Yeah, could be. It's probably not with Yorick,
Oh,
you
well,
know.
yeah. But, the thing Yorick represents.
It would be funny if the whole of Tulsa still talked like Yorick somehow.
That
Inexplicably,
would be so
it had
good.
this that he had this funny British voice.
It would be beautiful. I would appreciate that. So I think the next half of our episode is going to be extremely hard to condense into half an hour, but we're going to try. This brings us to the vote. So discerning patrons will know that the vote is not complicated usually. We are given choices up to three usually, more often than not two, and we pick which one. But we have been given a write-in poll this week where we were instructed by Booth John, the entity who usually gives us our choices and opens and closes the chapters, to write our potential questions that Arthur should ask Yorick in the comments, and then the three most liked comments would make it into a vote. So basically that meant you can you can like all of the comments you want. You can only like each comment once because obviously that's how Patreon works.
That's
But the
democracy.
ones, yeah, that's democracy. But the ones with the highest counts on Thursday morning, when the poll usually goes up,
Hmm.
would be placed into the official poll for the chapter, and then we would vote on those. So, what ended up happening was everybody commented with questions that they thought Arthur should say out loud to Yorick, and we were told very explicitly that Arthur will ask follow up questions. So we weren't meant
Yeah.
to be asking a question that was comprehensive of everything we wanted to know. We just had to start them on the right track, basically, and
Yeah.
Arthur would take it from there. So really, we're just picking like a general subject or a path to follow. And what's the first question you would ask? Now,
Yeah.
Arthur's intention at the end of the chapter was to impersonate Yorick, and he's saying, I need to know everything about this guy. And Yorick's like, oh, well, I know a lot, so, because I was him, so, like, you're
Hmm.
going to need to be more specific, my guy.
Hmm.
And Arthur, luckily, we're able to narrow it down for him. However, first point of order, write-in votes have not happened since
Season two,
yeah, season 2 when there was like 20 people looking at this show.
unless there was one in season one. I don't remember.
I know
But
for
yeah,
sure there's been two write-in votes before this
yeah,
because people kept correcting me when I said Kane was the only write-in vote.
yeah,
And that's my bad, but there have only been a couple of write-in votes before this. It is pretty unprecedented. And also we got very clear messaging because of just the scope of the show and the way that it's run now and how many people are voting regularly.
oh
We've
yeah,
we've exceeded 300 usually by now at the end of the vote cycles, that it just wouldn't be practical to do another write-in vote. It's too many comments, too many likes, just too much discourse about like how many, like how do you sift through what's a comment if it doesn't have a question mark, does it still count as a question? Like it's just too complicated. So I think the broad majority of people had given up on getting an interesting style of voting for a long time, outside of like the decoding polls that we just had, which was also unprecedented.
those were so fun.
That was also a lot of fun. I'm very excited about that. But no, Harlan decided like we were just going to be able to do a write in vote like it was no big deal, and we all lost our mind. As a result, we have like a ton of comments with amazing potential questions that everybody is usually very clearly defining why they're asking this question. And if you have become a patron recently, if you're listening to this in the future, I would really encourage you to go back, find chapter 234's poll, and read, well, not the poll, but the chapter release, and read the comments under there, because there were so many amazing questions. And although I did write the vast majority of them down, there's no way we're going to get to even read them all out on this episode.
The most important one, of course, being from Patreon member Arthur being, was he hot? And the fact that it didn't make it into the top three, I think shows corruption within the voting system, personally.
Yeah, I
And we
am
need to
calling that
investigate it.
I'm saying that was
Yeah,
rigged.
it was definitely rigged, but we all know it, so we just have to move on.
Yeah, I think that there's no way to encapsulate how fun it was to watch people participate. But on the flip side,
Thank you, Ochi. That's a really good picture. I love that you drew me like Darwin from The Amazing World of Gumball. That's a really good, that's very good. Just a fish with legs. That's pretty great. I think Queen's dead. I think she's fallen onto the floor.
so so we've just been gifted a beautiful doodle of my little pink dog that I use for the streams slamming fish into a locker like the little nerd he is.
Yeah, or yeah, it does look like that. It's very funny.
Okay, what was I? Oh my God, what was I saying?
Dude, I don't even remember.
Oh my
Oh, we
God,
were
okay.
talking about was he hot? Do you think so? Y
Yes.
slash N?
Yeah, so there were so many great comments, and I think it's totally worth it to go back and read them, and not just read the questions but read the responses that came, because you can really see where people's heads were at in real time and how they could rationalize what they were asking. And I do think it's important to point out, I know there are a lot of people who are very frustrated with this poll. I'm not even gonna lie, I definitely had my moments where I was like holding my head in my hands.
We have Roses of Envy, who had one of the most popular comments in the autopsy chat right now, who was saying that
Oh,
they can put a little blurb about what they asked about their question.
oh, that would be great. I would
Yeah,
really love that. Please do. And then make sure to ping me Roses of Envy. So, by the way, Roses of Envy was a huge part of the poll. I made a spreadsheet with at the time all
you
that I
did.
could
And I
keep
was just
up.
saying, like, I don't think it's gonna, I think it's out of our hands. But I do
Yeah.
appreciate the drive. You're a very spreadsheet person. If I look at Google Sheets, I start sweating. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm scared of it.
I made a spreadsheet of all of the votes that were commented, and like, who was in the lead and what was going on. Now, it didn't get updated very frequently just because it really didn't need to be. At a certain point, it just became obvious that like it was out of our hands, and really it was because it's very hard to coordinate something like this between half of the Patreon voters in the Discord and half of
Uh,
them who are in the Patreon, and then the
yeah.
very small percentage who actually look at the poll chat, because not everyone's active. So I knew that we had at least 30 people in the poll chat, maybe more, who would get behind doing a coordinated effort to kind of like bomb one of the comments and make sure
hmm
that we got something in. But it just
Some would
wasn't.
call this corruption and voter manipulation, but here on the Autopsy channel, we call it using the mechanics as intended.
Yeah, this is not a bug, it's a feature, I
But
think,
yeah,
frankly.
yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
there were a lot of great questions here, but like, just to give people who are not patrons or who don't have the time and energy to go surf through all that, I'm going to read out some of the questions from each category. So in my spreadsheet, if you are not able to see it, I did categorize, well, I took the time to categorize all of the
You
questions
did.
and like try to break them up into digestible categories of what they were talking about. So
Because
like,
a lot of them were very similar too.
yes, I did not want people to do the whole gerrymandering thing and
Oh
vote
God.
for to have two questions that were too similar get it to into the poll. So I really wanted to highlight how we had to be sure that we weren't voting for basically the
Yeah.
same thing. But here, so some of the categories we have: what the prince thought or knew, the prince's habits, mannerisms, or personality, the prince's intentions or motivations, the prince's background, history, or connections, something related to Carringford or the current place and time, and then we had like a general miscellaneous category.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of good questions in all of these categories. Ultimately, the ones that made it to the poll, just for those who are not able to see at home: what was written in the letter the prince received? How was Warren intending to approach the meeting? And with it being a different history, how did the politics differ?
Mhm.
So this was a vote that, as you can see, becomes pretty nuanced depending on how you're looking at the conversation and how it's going to go. Also, keeping in mind that we only control so much of the vote. Roses of Envy has chimed in, and Roses of Envy is the current one of the poll options and currently in the lead at 39%. Roses of Envy is also the vote that I chose, as you can see on the screen if you're listening to the live recording.
So did I.
Fish and I are finally on the same side. We're not always, and it's really fun when we are.
They said it would never
They
happen.
said they said we couldn't do it. But Roses of Envy says, Once finding out that we were in a different history, a different timeline, and that the prince is more of a title than a position with the whole France invading England realization, my primary worry was for Arthur to avoid stepping on toes. In my
Yeah,
mind, if Arthur knows what to expect politically, social politics as well, he's able to navigate conversations knowing how to talk, knowing the prince's standing compared to other people in the castle.
yeah,
I think that's a great mindset. And Roses of Envy, I don't know if you've been able to see, but like everybody has been very strongly arguing in favor of your question. Fish and I are big fans.
yeah.
Such an honor to have you in the chat tonight.
Such an honor to have such an esteemed guest.
Yes,
Thank
we are
you.
very appreciative of you contributing your voice to the comments so that we could get a great question there. And they're all good questions. I don't think there's a such a thing as a terrible question. I think
Oh
there are
yeah,
definitely questions that I mean there's always questions that I wouldn't have picked, which is why I didn't vote for them, but I think that everybody had their own rationale and it all made sense with the information they were given at the time. And I just want to make that real clear before I say this was definitely one of the most frustrating votes I've ever been a part of.
yeah. This has been a rough one for Queen, and I'm like massaging her shoulders currently as we speak. This was, yeah. It wasn't super frustrating for me, I don't think, but it was a little bit frantic because there was the disconnect, which isn't even really a disconnect, but the coordinating things on the Patreon versus in the Discord, because there is a number of people who aren't in the Discord and are only on the Patreon. So it's difficult to reach that amount of people. So you just have to be very, very vocal in the Patreon comment section. But it was a challenge. I had fun with it, honestly. I feel better about it now that the option I want to win is winning. But
Yeah, naturally.
naturally, I feel a little bit more soothed and less anxious.
I think that I'm gonna read a few of the questions out that did not make it into the poll because I think they're
Hmm.
great. So Bram had asked, "What did the prince assume would happen during his visit to the castle, even if he wasn't certain?" I liked that one.
Yeah,
The reason I did not vote for it in terms of things that I liked was for in the comments was I just felt like it didn't the fact that he wasn't certain and it wasn't a fact really threw me off. Like I don't really want to know what the prince's opinions were. I guess
hmm,
if we were certain that we were going to be walking into a specific type of situation that might be useful,
yeah.
but
The whole thing starting out with the fact that Warren explicitly, as told to us by Yorick, he did not know who sent him the invitation. He had never been to the castle, and he had no idea why he was being summoned to it. But his curiosity was piqued, apparently, so he had decided to come anyways. So trying to ascertain, trying to kind of get into his head has been very, very interesting.
yeah.
And like
And I think we're
trying to
we're
work
also
out,
left.
yeah.
Go ahead, Fish.
Oh no, I was gonna say trying to work out what information he would have that could help Arthur, who is going to actively attempt to impersonate him at this meeting. Like, what info did he have that wasn't related to shit that he didn't know that could help him?
Yeah. And the fact that we were left knowing that the letter was not helpful, knowing that the letter didn't have anything in it that talked about who sent it or what the motivations were, I
Yeah.
think that was really hard for people, not just because we really desperately wanted to read it,
And some people
because
didn't remember that detail either, so I had to, which is understandable. It was like in episode 44.
which I we were a little busy.
There was a
we
lot
we
going
were
on in
all
episode 44.
we were dealing with a lot of things in 44. I didn't remember that detail. I just believed you
Yeah.
when you said it.
Yeah, I found the transcripts. I be posting the receipts.
The recipitus.
Yeah. But yeah, that throws kind of a wrench into at least what you would probably assume you would ask first. Like, oh, what did he
Right,
know about
yeah.
these people? It's like he doesn't know shit, whatever.
Yeah, so Control posted a question from Rowan Oak that he really liked in the comments. What is something only the prince would know? And he said, might not have an extreme answer, but I thought this would be useful. Yeah, I really liked that question too. The only reason I would be skeptical of it is because
It could be
there's
something like, I
probably
have a birthmark on my left foot,
yeah,
you
like
know?
it could be completely useless to the situation because these people at the castle may not know him that well. We really
Yeah.
don't know what we're walking into, which makes it even harder to discern what information is important and what can be left
Yeah.
behind.
That's why I think that the broader sort of questioning about what kind of a person I mean, not what kind of a person Warren was and what would be expected of him by other people, even if they didn't know him personally, if they just knew of him. That's why I think that the sort of asking about at least the history and the politics, and then that hopefully being a good enough segue into, okay, well then how did those politics affect Warren and how would people view him through that lens? Seems like a better line of questioning to start off with.
Yeah, Graham posted Graham posted his own question, which was what behavior would be expected from the prince and what knowledge would he be expected to have? And this I
Yeah,
did really like this question.
I like this one too. I voted for it. I thought that it would win. I'm sad it wasn't in the top three.
Graham, it absolutely was okay to post your own question. I would encourage it. If you're
No
here and
rules,
you
just
wrote a
right.
question down, yeah, please share it. I would love to know. I loved this question. I think it did get a pretty great amount of likes if I
It did,
remember.
yeah. Yeah, it just barely eked out the other ones did over it. Yeah, fourth place. It was fourth place out of three. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very close and it was good. I think the reason it did not make it into the poll was because it feels too generous to answer. Like from Harlan, if I'm writing a story and I give my reader a free rein to use the protagonist as a conduit and find out information and they say, "Well, what do I need to know?"
I still would have voted for it.
You're circumventing the game and I feel like I'd be worried about what that means. Like that I feel like there's too much to interpret from a storytelling perspective, but more than that, I think it's also that I think it's
I
still
would
too
just be like, I won.
it's still too broad.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also wonder which question in that two-part question would have actually made it to the poll because
Me too.
to for those who are at home, the poll doesn't take the questions verbatim every time.
Yeah.
Like for example, the one that's winning right now was really diluted into just the last sentence of the question. It doesn't
Hmm.
have all of the context and discussion around the question, so these questions would have probably been boiled down and reduced as far as it,
Yeah.
people asking really lengthy ones or ones that had multiple questions inside of them. We
Yeah.
only would have gotten one.
It was really up to Harlan, but I appreciate people who did kind of give their explanation for why,
Yeah.
because I mean, that means that, he's read them. Out of the three that are winning, I feel most confident about getting one that is broader but still relevant, and then we could use to zoom in on Warren specifically. The second option, I feel like is in the similar vein and could lead to similar things, but I don't feel as confident in it leading to the places where I personally feel like would be the most helpful.
Yeah, I think the one Fish is talking about for those who don't have a
Oh,
visual
yeah.
is how was Warren intending to approach the meeting, which is Nikki's question.
Yeah.
And Nikki is a friend of ours. We talked to Nikki
Shouts
outside
out.
of the Invictus server. Nikki's great. Very and I'm very proud because Nikki has a lot of people that are very loudly and determinedly shouting Nikki down. So that takes a lot. It can be a little bit intimidating when there are multiple people
Mhm.
who want to argue with you in poll chat and you're like the only one on your own side. It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that it is a genuinely a great question. I think that the way it is phrased is too open to interpretation ultimately, and that is what the downfall is. How is Warren intending to approach? It doesn't really matter. His intentions don't really matter because they could change at any point on his way to the castle, but also approaching the meeting, like Nikki is explaining that it should be what the intention is to get Arthur asking about Warren's intent into the meeting in order to lead down a path that is more specific for a line of questioning about Warren, whereas the politics question is more broad and
Yeah.
hoping that the context of the story focuses it on Warren. So
Yeah.
it's just a more hands-on way of making sure that the conversation stays about Warren, which I don't
Hmm.
feel is necessary. I think the context of the story will
Hmm.
do that for us.
I was going to go with Nikki's before I kind of had a little think about it, and then I realized that I kind of want the same answer. I feel like they could lead to the similar answers, but then just thinking about the politics one, it felt more I felt more confident in it being able to at least give something for Arthur more specifically to work with in crafting this persona that he is putting on, and he needs to be convincing enough to get in the front door and hopefully continue to have the ability to move around freely, whatever this castle is.
What I just am so frustrated by is the fact that Nikki's wonderful question is not even second place. It is what was written in the letter the prince
Oh,
received, which is a question we have already answered in the narrative. And it
yeah.
is really hard because I understand not remembering that we already know that. And I also understand people's perspective because they're saying, I know that we don't know who wrote it or why he's going, but we could continue to investigate the letter and like maybe we'll recognize something.
And see if there's anything like a sigil or like a marking that Yorn
Yeah.
would tell us about. And I also want to know that if we could have him recite the letter, I do think that might be helpful. But I just kept coming back around to okay, well, does that give Arthur anything he can work with? Like, is that information that he can use to impersonate Warren more effectively? And the answer to that, I think, is just no. Like, if we know what the letter reads, we don't, that doesn't give us
We really don't
anything.
have, it's not it, the
Yeah,
letter isn't about Warren, it's addressed
yeah,
to Warren. And so
yeah.
like it's really something that somebody else gave to Warren, and it's not, has nothing to really do with him as a person. It's just the fact that he was summoned. And I understand again like why you would be interested and curious, and I definitely wish we could have at least heard the letter, but I think we're just really scared of leaving any stone unturned, and the fact that we have
Yeah.
access to something that was written down in Malevolent is really tempting, especially when we have that letter from Oscar that has somehow survived this long and still has not been opened. I think people are very antsy about that. I also think people might be really worried about missing something in the letter that is going to be a big gotcha, but I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think it would be kind of a dick move to introduce a letter that invites us somewhere and then be like, well, there was secretly a thing that you had to know. And if you didn't know that, then you would be screwed.
And also another thing that I kept thinking was the fact that if it turned out the letter had the marking of the Order of the Fallen Star on it, or it had this specific cult thing, we already know I mean, I at least am, but I think most of us are already expecting this to be like a cult situation, you know? And even so it wouldn't really be a big revelation of, oh my God, this was a cult the whole time if we, you know, discern some kind of reading, some kind of meaning from the letter. It just didn't seem like new information.
Yeah, definitely. I think and I just think I'm frustrated that it is so close because the percentages are 37 to 39, and I swear to God, if we end up having to read this letter and nothing comes out of it, it will drive me up the wall. So like for
I
the
don't
record,
I think we're good. I think we're cool. I think we're cool now.
I hope to God that we keep this slight lead. I'm going to read a couple more of these
Yeah.
questions out. So, Sunny, so there were two people named Sunny on Patreon, one with a capital S and one with a lowercase s, and they both had a pretty good amount of votes. The first Sunny said was, "What is the prince like on a more personal level?" And the second Sunny said, I think it would be useful to know about the prince's personality. Is he
Yeah.
callous or and cold or kind and compassionate? Is he a cultist? Is there anything significant about his persona, etc.? So like you can tell people were not really, they didn't really care if it was asking more than one question. They were just going to vote for it anyway in the hopes that one of those questions like would get
I
picked.
don't blame them. I don't blame them. I
Yeah, I would have done the same thing.
It was kind of like a mad scramble to get like the first wave of people.
Yeah. I also, I mean, we all had regrets as soon as we saw the polls. I
Yeah.
think almost everybody in the chat was like, I'm starting to regret the comment that I liked. And it wasn't because it was a bad question to ask, but we could have asked a lot of other things and we just didn't. And I think it was just because we didn't really have time. We only had what, 48 hours to ask
Yeah.
questions and vote on them. Yeah. So we had 48 hours to not only think of a really good question, but then gather enough votes to
Enough
get that
likes.
question into the poll. Yeah, enough
Yeah.
likes to get it into the poll. And then we had to hope that that good question would make it through the whole poll. So, I mean, it's kind of a losing game, that the odds that a really, really good, the perfect question would have come along is really slim anyway.
I
But
liked it though.
you can always see how you could have done it better. I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed the fact that there was so much to talk about. And
Yeah.
I really missed that with polls. So often it's like we're having discussions about things that are way too flexible. This was very, very nuanced conversation, and I really liked
Yeah.
it.
It was very fun.
Another question that got quite a lot of likes was what was unusual about the invitation, which was asked by Lambda, who people may recognize as a name as one of our guest co-hosts.
Hmm.
So I did really like this question because I would have loved to know what the fuck makes you like pick up and go follow a letter that you don't know who summoned you and you don't know why, but you're just gonna like go. I would
Yeah.
love to know what the fuck the letter looked like to make him do that. But maybe Warren is like a nomad who's like a free spirit and wanders around eating croissants or whatever the French do.
That's definitely what the French do. I'm almost certain of it.
I hope we don't have any Frenchians in the chat.
Well, that's also definitely what they're called.
Yeah. Yeah, Vulcan Troll says, also, I don't think that most people liking comments were ever going to look at it again. So it was really up to Discord poll chat soldiers to try and dump likes on comments, which
Yeah.
was very hard to do because, I mean, poll chat, it's a Discord server. There's a lot of other things to see and do, and it was very chaotic. Also, the fact that Patreon's interface in general just kind of sucks.
Patreon is a website.
It's very functional. And I feel like there was really not a good way to get everybody to see the same thing. And I was starting to say after like 20 comments, people were not going to keep clicking and like reading all of the questions. There was just going to be a point where the average voter probably went, I'm not going to do this. That's a lot of work. And just like voted for whatever sounded good and then never went back to it, which I cannot imagine that life. But I get it. And you have to think
Yeah.
about those voters too. So, it is what it is. We have the options we have. There's no sense harping on it. But I do think there were a lot of really great questions. And if you get the time to look back on some of the ones that people asked, they're really great. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Buried in the Archives asked several questions. So did Project World Builder. Project World Builder had like three back to back.
Yeah, those ones were good.
One was the prince aware of any rituals slash rumors surrounding the worship of old gods happening at Carringford? Do you know what I would give to know the answer to that?
I would love to know that.
The other one was, what did the prince know about the hierarchy at Carringford? Which was a great question,
Hmm.
especially if we're going to meet somebody associated with that. The other question that they asked was, what is going on in the prince's realm that could be possible reasons for his invitation there? Why would the folks at Carringford be interested in him? Again, great questions. I really, now in retrospect, really wish that some of those had made it into the poll. Not necessarily because they would have helped us impersonate Warren better, but because I like them better than what was written in the letter. And if I have to go up against something, I'd rather it be one of those questions and
Yeah.
like concede to getting one of those. So this is my PSA. Please help me make sure that that question doesn't win, because oh boy, I will be so upset. I
I
will
think we're
cry. You don't want me
fine.
crying.
I think we're fine. It's
Fish, I have
fine.
seen people flip at the last moment for so much less. I
And
have seen
I have
people
I've
walk into
definitely
the
never done
chat
that.
and just go, you know what? I'm feeling frisky. Let's
Yeah.
flip. And then suddenly everybody's like, you know what? I'm bored. Let's just flip. And it's just the most there's no reason for it. We're
I
all
know.
safe and we're fine and we're happy, and then people come in and they knock my sandcastle down.
Well, I always have perfect reasonings behind why I flip, so this doesn't apply to me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Fish. Fish who always knows exactly what's going on.
I sure do. And when I'm wrong, I'm
No,
just
you're not.
making it interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate you coming on and hanging out, Fish.
Oh yeah,
You
this was
are
fun.
such a delight to have on, and I know I dunk on Laura a lot, but I really do appreciate your contribution, and I think that you do a
Thank
lot of really
you.
good things for the community and helping people stay
Aw,
informed.
that's really nice. Thanks. I just can't shut the fuck up. Personally, that's kind of my thing.
I love it. I love that about you. So, do you know the call and response?
Yeah, something about soda.
Good. See, we've made it kind of memorable. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say the horrors persist and you're going to say but so do we.
Okay. I'll pronounce it.
Okay. Thank you to everyone joining us live, like Vol Control, Rebecca, and Graham, of course. Thank you to our volunteer transcription team and our volunteer editing team. And thanks to everyone listening in the future. You can find Malevolent Autopsy on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Visit Linktree, that's linktr.ee/malevolent autopsy for all the handiest links. And as always, the horrors persist.
But so do we.
Thank you, Fish, and good night, everybody.
Good night, Godspeed.